Ouija boards. A tool of communication with the beings of the other world. Regardless if you've ever participated in this act, you've definitely heard some stories about things going wrong while playing this popular game. About the people who simply ask the wrong questions. It's almost Halloween. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and let me take you on a trip to 3 true Ouija board horror stories. Three, two, one, and the half-faced man. This is the dumbest thing I've ever participated in. When reading about Ouija boards moments on this site, I was wondering to myself why I've never experienced anything like it. I mean, I did it once with my friends at school when we had a free period, but it was one of those crappy ones, made out of cardboard and looks like something you'd buy from a cheap magic store. Anyways, when bringing it up, my friends who is sort of an expert in the paranormal activities started that when we did it, we were kidding around. None of us believed in it. So my friend got 5 white candles and I asked him what he was doing. He said, "We're going to communicate with some spirits." I sort of felt a little scared and asked him if it was a good idea due to the stories I've read here. He said it was fine as long as the candles are lit. The spirit would be trapped in its circle as a sort of a barrier. I have no idea where he gets its information from. He then called our other 3 friends who were playing Street Fighter 4 downstairs to come up and join. Daniel, the paranormal expert, set up the candles in a form of a star, a pentagram. He lit them up and told us to sit outside of it, but in between the candles, and placed the Ouija board in the middle. One of my friends was laughing, and you'll know why as you read on. We sat and we started asking questions. My friend who was laughing before burst out in laughter and asked, "Is your ectoplasm your jizz?" We all started cracking up, and then Daniel told us to get serious, but some of us were still giggling. Then all of a sudden, the pointer went to 3, and Daniel said, "Don't move it." We were all shocked and told him that none of us had moved it. We all let go of the pointer and it jerked to the left a bit, not by much, but enough for the 5 of us to notice it moved on its own. My friend Craig, who started to get freaked out, shot straight up and pointed to the board. What the hell was that? We all stood up and looked at each other. Daniel, on the other hand, placed his hand on the pointer and yelled at us to do the same. All 3 of us did so, but Craig was like, Nah, wait, man, this is some scary shit. I'm not getting possessed." Daniel yelled at him to just do it. So he sat down and put one hand on the pointer in frustration. Daniel, who was serious, asked, "What does 3 mean?" Kira was the kid who was laughing. He starts laughing again, but this time Daniel told him to keep it to himself. The pointer moved to 2. And Daniel looked at us as we were all freaked out. I was thinking to myself that this is actually happening. I told Daniel to stop because I was remembering the stories that I read online. He agreed, and as soon as we let go of the pointer, it shot straight to 1. Daniel quickly got up and ran outside. We all stepped back from the board and he came running back with a bell and some incense. He went to one of the candles to light the incense, but it blew out by itself. Daniel, who was obviously getting freaked out, was saying shit like 100 times. He quickly went to the other 4 that were left and they blew out by themselves as well. The 4 of us were just standing back getting scared shitless. He lit the incense with a lighter and started ringing the bell. Rick then screamed bloody murder and moved back in fear, causing the 3 of us to fall on the floor. We're all like, what the fuck was that about? He quickly moved away from the door as far as he could and said that there was some man with half a face standing in the doorway. All of us had chills running down our spines and something moving away from the door but not looking at it. Craig then, all of a sudden, vomited. I quickly ran to Daniel and grabbed his arm to tell him to do something. We were all having difficulty breathing and felt really weak, to the point that we were about to cry in weakness. Like when you're really tired, you sigh and moan and it feels like you're about to cry. Well, that was it. Daniel then lit the 5 candles and threw the incense on the board, and it lights on fire. After a few seconds, everything was back to normal. We still felt a bit weak, but our strength was building back up. Rick was still shaken by what he saw. Kira was just standing there looking into space from shock. Craig was lying down on the bed, and for Daniel and I, we were cleaning up. 4 days had passed from that event. Every morning I would wake up. My head would hurt until I lay back down and it'd be okay. I stand up, my head would hurt again. Rick would get flashes of the half-faced guy every night at exactly 9 p.m. Craig would wake up at random times during the middle of the night to have some sense of overwhelming fear come over him. Kira, he can't be alone in his house anymore because he feels as if someone is watching him, and Daniel hears whispers during the night. My headaches would come and go, but medication doesn't seem to be doing anything. Going to the doctors this weekend. An evil imposter. This story is not one of my own, but belongs to my mother, whom is happy to share her experience to forewarn anyone attempted on performing a seance. This story has not been fabricated in any such way, although some events may be slightly off-tune due to the recollection of my thoughts. The story commences a few weeks after my grandmother's suicide. My mother, whom I'll call Jennifer, being no more than 18, was downright distraught and staying with a handful of her 7 closest friends, being 3 boys and 4 girls. Sometime during the night, one of Jennifer's more venturesome friends, who I shall call David, persuaded Jennifer to do a seance to see if they could make contact with her mother, Margaret. David began setting up a small table in the middle of Jennifer's dining room, with only one white candle as a light source, and gathered everyone around to hold hands. As they began, something possessed Jennifer's friend Julia, posing as Jennifer's mother. Everyone could sense that this was not indeed Jennifer's mom, but something else. As a feeling of evil radiated from this imposter, Julia's face turned a sudden dark and menacing expression as her eyes clouded over. The thing had an evil, bone-chilling smile set on its face. As it spoke, its voice was dark and demonic, bordering on an inhuman pitch. Pressing onward, the thing did not once reveal its true identity. As it recalled every fine detail about Jennifer's mom, the thing grew exceedingly confident as a look of horror set upon everyone's face as it spoke about Jennifer's mom, right down to the things only Jennifer and her mom knew, which brought a strong feeling of unease and a wave of nausea. In the end, everyone was beyond terrified and begged David to make it leave. Without warning, the creature abruptly stood up and tried to move. David and John leaped to their feet to hold it down. The thing had inhumanly brute strength as it violently thrashed about with the weight of 2 fully grown men on it. Jennifer then bolted out of the house in pure terror as she raced for the car. She wanted to find a priest at 4 a.m, leaving David and John and the rest to pin down this demonic creature. As the priest arrived, the thing was still thrashing about, with David and John pinning it down as the girls huddled in the corner of the room screaming in absolute horror. The priest ordered everyone out of the house, as the thing was not safe and the house was infested with evil. Grabbing her grandfather from his bed upstairs, Jennifer and the group was led outside and far away as an exorcism was performed. As the exorcism was carried out, Julia gained consciousness and had no recollection of the previous hour, saying all she remembered was doing a seance and then blacking out. With the exorcism successfully completed, the priest then moved on to cleansing and blessing the house, sprinkling holy water in each room while reciting a prayer. As he blessed each room, parts of the house sizzled profusely as the holy water came in contact with it. As the priest concluded the cleansing, everyone was allowed back inside. The group all agreed, since being profoundly traumatized, that it was best to stay at a hotel overnight. To this day, my mother has never touched a Ouija board or performed a seance, as she still always severely warns my brother and I of the consequences. My mother was so traumatized by the whole ordeal that she had only plucked up the courage to explain what occurred that horrible night to me 36 years later. I hope this story goes to show the danger and damage performing a seance can cause without the proper precautions and professionalism. Thank you for reading. All comments, questions, and feedback are much appreciated. A message from beyond. It started out like any other night. Me and my friend Rebecca, Joseph, and Harj were just watching TV, and we got really bored, and then one of us, I can't remember who, suggested that we use the old Ouija board that I had found a couple of weeks ago when I cleaned out my garage. I didn't think much of it, as my parents are not very religious, and though I've never asked them, they must have used it at some point, or else why would it be in my house? I've never heard any scary stories or any mention of the possible dangers of such things, so I just went and got it without a second thought. I can vividly recollect thinking that it's just a subconscious rambling, the results of which are only dangerous to those who are a danger to themselves. I was very wrong. I eventually managed to drag it from the garage. However, the wooden planchette that accompanies it was nowhere to be found, so we had to use a drinking glass. After about 10 minutes of joking and some of the worst ghost impressions imaginable, we finally decided to give it a shot. Everyone seemed relaxed and calm, definitely not the attributes you would typically associate with a group who are about to attempt to contact the dead. So we proceeded to open up the game, and as I didn't know much about the rules and how to play it, we suggested, as Joseph was the oldest, so that he should talk and be the group's orator. After a few failed attempts and giggles from all of us, including him, he shouted out, "Is anybody there?" The glass began lightly fluttering around the board, with everyone in the group accusing the other of moving it. This went on for a little while, counting through the numbers and sliding through the alphabet, until Joseph reiterated the question, "Who are you?" It spelled D-A-M-Y-N. Damn? We all looked at each other, wondering whether anyone knew the name or whether it had any special significance, and nobody seemed to be able to recall anything. So then, Joseph asserted that maybe it was spelled wrong and asked it to recite again. But this time it spelled D-A-M-I-E-N. Damien. Everyone else assumed the same banal expression as earlier. However, it was then that I realized something. My childhood neighbor just before we had moved to this new house had been called Damien. And when we were about 14 years old, he had been tragically killed in a car accident. Though we weren't really good friends, we still knew each other and would talk on occasion. This is why it seems so weird to me that I didn't really believe that someone I hardly knew would come through. But irrespective of everything else, there is one thing that I am sure of. There's absolutely no way that Rebecca, Joseph, or Harge could have known anything about this, and as it was something I never spoken of or, in all honesty, thought about for a long time. I then spoke up and asked what Damien this was and where he was from, and something happened which makes this story to me completely unexplainable. It spelled out my hometown, and then when I asked it where I used to live, it dragged itself to 48, which was the correct house 48. I was becoming visibly anxious at this time, as the whole group could see, and though I had everyone telling me to calm down, I couldn't believe that this was happening, or at least I didn't want to believe it was. It must have been a mixture of arrogance, fear, and curiosity which led me to do the next thing. I was convinced that I must be unknowingly leading the game and moving the glass, so I asked aloud if I could leave the game and simply become a spectator. The board seemed to approve this, but Joseph and Rebecca were insisting that I keep my hand on the glass, and Harge seemed more worried about my personal welfare than any possible aggravation which might cause in the celestial realm. Joseph had retaken control over the game, and I asked him to pose a question on my behalf. If you really are Damien, then where did we go most Fridays after school? Knowing full well that the answer to this would either lead me to a comfy resolution or to great despair. The glass then slowly moved and spelled out Tunnels. Tunnels. The tunnels were where a large group of us would sometimes frequent on Friday afternoons. They were shallow water tunnels below ground level which were about 5 foot tall. We would spread our feet across the width of the tunnel and shimmy down to the end, spin around, and the goal would be to travel both ends of the tunnel without getting wet. I then clearly remember that I began to cry uncontrollably and didn't want to be involved with this anymore. There's absolutely no way that could have been a guess on their behalf or a product of my own subconscious ramblings, as I no longer was touching the board. Things then took a real turn for the worst, and without prompting the board, it began spelling out threats, taunts, and recalling the names of my relatives, both alive and deceased. I was screaming at them to stop, still holding on to the vague notion that maybe they were behind it, but looking at their terrified expressions, it was obvious that this was untrue. The three of them were being thrown around the board as the glass span violently in defiance of any questions or commands, and then I remember seeing something which will haunt me for the rest of my life. The glass somehow raised itself from the board, and it must have jumped at least 1 foot in the air. With her fingertips still lightly anchoring at its top, there was no point of grip, and no way could they have been lifting it in the air, with their limp index fingers resting on the top. The three of them stared in disbelief as I looked on in horror. Upon recollection, it was like watching a scary movie in slow motion. As the glass came crashing down onto the board, it smashed into tiny pieces, and it didn't seem as though such a height could have even fractured the glass, let alone smash it into pieces. We sat in a state of confusion, wondering what exactly just happened and what it was that had just been contacted. Though we remained friends for years afterwards, things were never quite the same after that night. Once something like that happens, you can't just flip a switch and go back to normal. It causes an inner conflict where you have to reassess all of the things you once thought were true about life and death. My purpose in transcribing the story is not to scaremonger people, nor is it to advocate the use of a Ouija board. I wanted to share this with the world and let people know that they should always be prepared whenever stepping into a situation where they are dealing with the unknown. Although it stands in opposition to every rational fiber of my thoughts, I have to concede that what we experienced that night was product of genuine supernatural phenomena.